that Supreme Court of the United States, beginning with a case called Garrett v. Alabama, back in the 1990s, they started to erode the things that we had in the ADA. And through a series of cases, made the ADA less than half of really what it was. And so I went to work again in about 2003 to pass legislation to set us back where we were in the beginning. And we worked hard on that, and 2 years ago, we got that signed into law, the ADA Act amendments. So all of the things that we did in 1990 are back in place. We put it in a situation so the Supreme Court can't overturn it anymore. And so now those civil rights that protect you, that protect your ability to be able to go out in the world and do anything in the United States, those are now firm, back in law. So we had our down, we came back up again. And we're not going to go back down ever again. It's time for us in America, way past time, I should say, but with the ADA, and in 20 years, to quit looking at people and saying, what is your disability? And start looking at people and saying, what are your abilities? Every person has abilities. Every single person can contribute to our society in one way or another. And so we have to strengthen our laws and our regulations to make sure that jobs are available, that there are reasonable accommodations for people to work, that we have adequate transportation. But there are two things. There are two things that I might say has stuck in my craw ever since. One of the first speeches I gave after the ADA was passed, and I'm proud it's my name on the bill, but the first speech I gave after that, I said, look, okay, we've got the Civil Rights Act passed, but there's something else that needs to be done. Because you see, there were goals that we set out in ADA. We set out goals. We set out the goals of full participation and equal opportunity and independent living and economic self-sufficiency. Those are the four great goals of the ADA. I gave a speech after it was enacted, and I said, but there's something else needs to be done. Something else. Unless and until we get personal assistance services for people with disabilities, the promise of the ADA will not be complete. I had a person tell me once, well, they said, Harkin, that's fine. You got to have reasonable accommodations at work. You got buses with all the lifts. That's all well and good, but what if I can't get out my door in the morning? What good does all that do me? I think of my nephew Kelly, who was injured. He was 19 years old, injured, became a severe paraplegic. But he was tough. He wasn't going to give up. This is my sister's boy. And he went to school and finished school, even though there were tremendous barriers. This is in the early 1980s. And then he wanted to live independently. So he did. He got his own little house. He got a van with a lift so he could get his wheelchair in and drive. He started a small business, employed people, made his own way in the world. But every morning when Kelly would get up, he had an assistant, a nurse, come in every morning and get him out of bed, help him with his bodily functions, get him cleaned up, help him shave, get him dressed. And as Kelly always said, but she didn't get my breakfast because I could make my own breakfast. And then he'd get in his wheelchair and out the door and get in his van and go to work. Then when he came home at night, he had either the same nurse or another one would come in, get him ready for bed, do his exercises. He exercised every day. Get him ready for bed, get him in bed. Next day, the same thing had happened. Now I know what you're thinking. You're saying that Kelly, my nephew's a pretty lucky guy. He must have had a lot of money to be able to afford that. Well, he didn't. His family was, well, middle income or lower. They didn't have a lot of money. Here's how Kelly could afford it. He was injured in the military. So the Veterans Administration, God bless the Veterans Administration, picked up all those bills. When he had to modify a house to make it so he could live in there, the Veterans Administration picked that up. When he needed a van with a lift, the Veterans Administration picked that up. But when he needed personal attendant services, the Veterans Administration has been picking that up for over 30 years. God bless the Veterans Administration. They're wonderful. But why should that just happen to people who are injured in the military? That same kind of assistance and supports ought to go to anyone who needs it. I don't care if they were injured in the military, injured in a swimming pool accident, a driving accident, or were born with a disability. Everyone in America ought to have those attendant services if they need them. And that is not too much to ask. It's not too much to ask. I told you, it's stuck in my craw ever since. Because independent living, economic self-sufficiency, one of the goals of the ADA, you can't get that unless you have a job. You can't get the job a lot of times unless you got transportation, or you got a place to live and you got personal attendant services. But we know that with a little bit of support and help, a person can go to work and become an income earner, a taxpayer, and make money. And that helps the whole system, helps the whole country. It also helps the individual to be able to contribute to our society. So to say that we're not going to do this because it costs too much is penny wise and pound foolish. To not be able to have personal attendant services for people that could use that and go get a job. We have, y'all hear the unemployment rates in America. 9%. Well, they say it's 9%. It's really about 18%. But don't get me started on that. And people say that's really bad. We got a lot of people unemployed. It is terrible. But among people with disabilities, over 60% of people with disabilities are unemployed today. That is a shame. That is shameful on America. That 60% of people who can work, who want to work, who have abilities, cannot get the job that they want. So I said, personal attendant services, number one. The second thing we've got to do is independent living. We've got to make sure that the money, two or three things. The first of all, right now, there is a bias in Medicaid. If you are eligible for a nursing home, you can go to the nursing home. Medicaid will pick it all up. But let's say you don't want to go to a nursing home. Let's say you want to live in a community with your friends and your family. Medicaid doesn't have to pick that up. Doesn't have to pick it up. Now, in Iowa, we have a system of waivers. There's a long waiting list. Some people are qualified, some people aren't. Well, that's got to end. I've been trying for years. Now, some of you in the rights movement have heard of MCASA. You've heard of the Community Choice Act. I've tried for 15 years to get this done. And I've been stopped every time because it costs too much money. That same old thing, costs too much money, again, without realizing the fact that if you can get people out in the community, you save all that other Medicaid money for nursing homes and stuff. Penny wise, pound foolish.